Hello and welcome to this introductory tutorial for using ThruTracker. When you open up ThruTracker, there's going to be two windows that open up. This is your main window, and then there's also a secondary window that's going to provide some information, so you can kind of keep that handy in the background. Now, first thing you're probably going to want to do is process a video, so I'll show you how to do that. You go to File, New 2D Detection, and then you're going to choose some settings for processing videos. So first thing I'm going to do is choose my video file. And there are some default videos that come with ThruTracker. I put mine in my Documents folder here in Example Data. I'm going to choose batexit.mp4. This is a video, thermal video of bats exiting a cave. Now I've chosen my video here, and I can choose my various settings for detection. There's two detectors. I recommend OpenCV, although if there's some compatibility issues with your operating system, you may not have that option available. For now, I'm going to use OpenCV. You can choose the range of frames you want to process, the minimum and maximum object size that will count as a detection. So in this case, the minimum size is 5 pixels. I've just set the maximum size some very large value here, 50,000, because I don't want to risk filtering. Sensitivity is a big dial here, which is going to determine how much noise sensitivity there's going to be as far as picking out the foreground from the background. So these values could range anywhere from 10 on the very low end up to about 50. So here I'm picking an intermediate value of 25. Background frames is going to determine how many frames it's using for generating the rolling background. So in this case, I'm using 50 frames. That's a fairly intermediate value. If the background was changing very quickly, then you might drop this to, say, 10 or 20. Or if you had a really stationary background and fast-moving animals, you could bump that up to 100 or more. Then image smoothing, this is applying an image Gaussian filter to blur the image at a particular resolution. So in this case, these bats are kind of medium small size. And so this is going to apply a 5 pixel wide smoothing to the image. So you want to sort of match this to the smallest object in the image you're trying to detect. And then there's some options here that we're not going to use here. After doing the detections for each frame, that's going to link those detections together into a track. And we have some different tracking options here. I'm going to say the minimum track length, I actually want to be 5 detections. The maximum gap length will tell you how long it's going to keep searching to add onto a track if it doesn't find a detection for that particular track in the next several frames. The match threshold determines how far away from the predicted location it will accept a detection. So this is going to determine how jumpy your tracks are. In this case, I'm using a value of 21 pixels. Once you've set all these settings, and I will go through a more detailed tutorial on how to really optimize this for different settings in a future tutorial, but for now, it's just a quick overview. Once you get those set, you click Run ThruTracker and wait for a second. And then it should start processing. It's showing a colorized version of the video here on the left, and then it's showing all of the detections on the right. So it's showing the actual pixels of the detections in yellow, and then the red circles show the centroids that it's using for the location of each one of those detections. Now you can see it's finished processing those 150 frames. It actually made 17,406 detections in those frames. Then it built those into tracks and processed all of that. Now it's populated your track drop-down window over here, and you can see that in that 150 frames generated 1,025 tracks. You can also go frame by frame and see all of the tracks that are present in those frame and the detections. You can also select particular tracks. Now, in this case, there are so many tracks that it's kind of difficult to separate them out. Perhaps if you had fewer tracks, this might be a little bit more useful. You can classify individual tracks as well. And in this case, they're all pretty much bats, so I'm not going to manually classify them. Now, the next option that I want to do here is to use these to count the bats. So in this case, there are 1,025 tracks, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there is 1,025 bats that were counted. Some of them are noise, some of them could be fragments of tracks. So there's a couple of tools that you can use here for counting. One is the track selector, and what this is going to do is visualize all of those tracks at once. Now there's a lot of tracks here, so it's going to take a second. And you can then select tracks based on their location. So for example, all these ones down here, I know are ones that are not exits. So this is actually showing a gate here, and those are probably bats underneath. So if I wanted to, I could classify all of those as something else. So I'm going to classify them as other, and I'm going to select them by choosing any part of that track and then click this Select Tracks button. And I can draw a box. It'll catch up with me. It'll draw a box around those and classify all of them as a particular category. Now, in this case, this is not going to work great for this application, so I'm actually going to use another tool, but I just wanted to show you that that tool is available. So I'm going to close that, and in this case, I'm actually going to use a track counter. And here, it's going to prompt me to draw a rectangle around the exit area. So this is going to count passes that are leaving or entering this rectangle. So in this case, I'm going to use the top of the gate. Then I'm going to draw a rectangle around the area where I think I'm most confident of tracking these bats. So I'm going to do it something like this. And now it's actually going to allow me to choose which parts of the rectangle to use for counting. I'm not going to include the bottom here because I think it's unlikely that we're going to get bats dropping down that I can confidently use for our counts here. I'm going to deselect bottom and then hit count. Now it's going to visualize those ones that it tracked. And we got an exit count of 438 exits and 8 re-entries into that rectangle with that time period. You can save this to a spreadsheet if you like. This will save it to a CSV file that you could open in Excel or another spreadsheet program. Okay, so that's how you can very quickly save that information. The next thing that you could do is make a detections video. So you can do that by going to Tools, Make Detections Video. And now it's going to overlay all of those detections onto the video itself. Now this is helpful for validating that it's working properly. Now I've customized those settings in ThruTracker to make sure it's working well, but you could check these videos and see if there's problems occurring that could help you figure out how you could optimize those settings better. So this looks like it's working pretty well. Right now it's just generating that video, so I'm going to wait till it finishes. You can see it's putting a little circle over each detection and giving a tail showing where the detections were for that track in the last couple of frames. All right, so that's finished. So I can close this window. And now it just made the detections video in the same folder where the original file was saved. So I'm going to open the file location of that exit video. And it just made this bat exit detections MP4 file. So now you can open that up. And we can make it big if we want. And looks like it's performing pretty well. Now it's not tracking these bats that are very small in the distance here, but for where we're drawing that rectangle, I think it's performing pretty well. All right, those are just some of the tools that you can use for 2D detection and tracking in ThruTracker. There are also tools for doing 3D detection and tracking, for calibrating thermal cameras, and other features which I'll be having tutorials for in future videos. Thanks for joining me today.